Hi, and welcome to Marketing Optimization with Alex Science. I'm your host, Alex Harris, and today we're talking with Rick Mulready. How you doing, Rick?
Good, Alex. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. Rick has a great podcast called Inside Social Media, where he talks big brand strategies for a small business budget. To get started, Rick, I want to ask, how are you optimizing social media to maximize your ROI?
The loaded question when it comes to social media ROI. You know what? It's really hard to, I'll be honest with you, it's hard to track your ROI when it comes to social media. And it's kind of the $1 million question. So everybody wants to know, hey, if I'm putting all this effort in on Facebook or Twitter or Google Plus, what is my return? And there are some simple things that you can do to maximize your ROI or track your ROI, I should say. And you can do things like obviously set up unique landing pages for whatever links that you're going to include in. Maybe it's a Facebook status update or a tweet that you send out or something like that, so you can concretely track conversions and so forth with unique URLs like that. You can also, I was talking to Scott Monty, who's the head of social media for Ford, and he was actually my first guest on the podcast. And we got talking a little bit about ROI, and he brought up something that was really interesting to me, and I've tried it out, and I've tested it and talked to other people about it and shared it with them to have them try it as well. And it works pretty well, and it's a simple rating system. So for example, if you put out a status update on Facebook and you get 50 shares and you get 10 comments and 100 likes, you can assign different points to each one of those actions that somebody is taking. And so, for example, a like would be 1 point, a comment would be 2 points, or 3 points, or maybe, and a share would be 5 points, because that's the most valuable thing. And I'm not talking where you're putting a status update out there that doesn't, I'm talking that a status update without a link in it, so that you're not able to have that direct conversion to a landing page. I'm talking more about where you're just adding value in sharing information out there, and you can install this little point system in there that it's very non-scientific, but you're still able to have some sort of a benchmark for your own social media efforts in this little point system. So the share is the most valuable thing that you're going to get out of that, or you're trying to get out of that status update. So you can assign it, say, 5 points, and you can just kind of keep track of all the status updates that you do, and in conjunction with Facebook's insights, that is going to give you information about sharing and so forth, that you can have your own sort of point system that way. But those are a couple simple little things that you can be doing, and sort of obvious things. But when it comes to ROI, when it comes to social media, a lot of it is assumed. I liken it to if you're running a billboard on the side of a highway. How are you really determining the ROI of that? You're making a lot of assumptions there. And honestly, same with TV, where you're making a lot of assumptions that way. So obviously, if you're a restaurant and you're doing a lunch special, and you put out a status update or on Facebook or on Twitter or so forth during the lunch hours, and then you see a big rush of people that are taking advantage of that lunch special, could you assume that your social media, your efforts there were successful? Yeah, probably. Do you directly know that? No, probably not, unless you maybe asked them when they came in, hey, I'm not, welcome to whatever shop. How'd you hear about us, or something like that? So kind of a roundabout answer, but it's very hard to, at this point, really get into the nitty gritty of determining your ROI.
I think you put it in good perspective, though, as long as you are creating some type of map to essentially track the momentum of your content strategy plan, then you can at least track some flow of the amount of customers that are visiting, and
for sure,
tie that back to some type of revenue source or lead generation source, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I said before, it's very hard to track it. I mean, it gets easier when you start using these more advanced systems, social media systems that are out there that will give you these, further tracking insights and so forth, and, where a consumer came into your site and where that purchase came from, or, tracking that sort of online conversion to, or online effort to an offline conversion, that sort of thing, you can get really advanced. But, I sort of, my main audience is that small business owner, maybe that medium sized business where they're not really using those systems. They're using more of maybe a free or paying a little bit of money each month to use like a, Hootsuite Pro or that sort of thing to track and to manage your social media. So that's why I kind of mentioned those sort of simpler ways to look at measuring your ROI.
Now, from all the experts that you've interviewed about social media, and it's mostly big brands, JetBlue, NASA, Coke, have you taken away some concepts that you can really apply to the small business strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing that everybody talks about on the show at one point or another is the importance of understanding not only what your business objective is and who your audience is, but you absolutely need to understand the platforms that are out there. You have your, the biggest challenge I hear from small business owners and clients I work with and listeners of the podcast and so forth is that they're overwhelmed with social media, that there are way too many options out there. And, one of the ways to sort of overcome that and be effective with your social media is to, yes, understand your business objective, that you have to understand that. And then you have to understand who your audience is, but understand the platform. So what are the intricacies of Facebook? What is happening on Twitter? How is Google Plus used? How is Instagram used? That sort of thing. And then aligning what you know about those platforms with your business objective and your audience. And that comes up, that's very consistent throughout many of the shows that I've done, where all the brands really harp on that, regardless of whether you're a Coca-Cola or a GE, to a small business owner that doesn't have the budget or resources that these big brands do. So that's very consistent throughout the shows.
And as far as a content marketing schedule, do you see most people get the most bang for their buck by creating maybe a seasonal or at least a proactive content marketing strategy and working that in with scheduling your social media? Does that really help fine tune and optimize that experience?
For sure. And especially for the small business owner, because they don't have a lot of time to be spending on social media. So the more that they can plan it out and schedule it, the easier it's going to be for them. So if they sort of chunk out their time, if you will, so maybe on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening when maybe it's a slower time for them, they can take a few hours to do some sort of scheduling and strategy and so forth. One thing I do want to, one area I want to caution though is that a lot of small businesses and a lot of actually big brands as well, when they schedule out content, they have to be really conscious of when that content is actually scheduled. And the reason for that is that if there is something terrible happens, like a big news story, and I'm thinking of the example I'm thinking of is the Boston Marathon bombing that happened earlier this year. There were some companies who had scheduled tweets going out that were going out during, as this event was breaking, and you really have to understand what's going on in on a day-to-day basis around the world, to be careful of when you're posting things, even when you're scheduling something like that, that you're really conscious of what's going on in the news and so forth, so that you're not, you just want to be careful. You don't want to do it in bad taste. So yes, absolutely, scheduling and having a content strategy for what content you're going to put out and scheduling it's definitely going to help you keep things organized and make things easier for you as you go along. But definitely just be conscious of of what's going on in the news, so that you can keep your updates and so forth in good taste.
And the software that you recommend to do the scheduling, is it Buffer and Hootsuite type of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the two ones that I love the most as far as the scheduling. Hootsuite's really easy. Even you don't even have to. I mean, the pro version is great, but just even the free platform that they offer is great to track conversations that are going on out there. So that's very, very important when it comes to social media. A lot of people miss that point, that they are using it as I like to call it a virtual bullhorn, where they're up on their virtual soapbox, if you will, and they're spouting out sales messages about their business, and they're really missing the point of listening to the conversations that are happening about whether it's their brand or their name or their industry, keywords in their industry, and then joining those conversations appropriately and adding value. And Hootsuite is a really good platform to do that because it's very easy to set up, tracking a keyword, for example, or your brand name or business name or whatever. And then Buffer is super simple to use. Once you come across content, you can schedule it up in your Buffer, and that will take care of going out at specified times. Now, I will say that using these tools, I don't recommend publishing the same content across multiple platforms. And I can hear sort of a collective groan from small businesses because that's a real time-saving thing to do. Is that put one update out there or put one post together and run it across Google Plus, Facebook, and Twitter, and whatever it may be. Don't do that, because each platform, as this comes back to what I was talking about before, is each platform has its own voice and its sort of own feel and how users use that platform. And it's going to be very different across each one. So you want to make sure that the content that you're putting out sort of matches that voice and how people are using it. So even though I definitely recommend Buffer and Hootsuite, just be conscious of not posting the same type of content or the same post or the same update across all the different platforms that you're on.
Yeah, I think you want to schedule in an appropriate way, maybe not overschedule, but still be committed to be engaging, because if you're not talking to humans, then you're not going to get anything back. And going from that push marketing strategy to really engaging and creating that relationship, I think is core of what you're talking about. Can you give us some tips on becoming more engaging with Twitter or Google Plus or Facebook?
For sure.
In general?
You really want to treat it like you're having a conversation with somebody, with your customer. So if you are, if you're an online business, that you want to make sure that you're carrying over what your brand stands for and into your social media. And so, for example, what's an example that, so NASA, for example, I've had them on the show actually a couple of different teams within NASA on the show. And, they're all about sharing what's going on in space and what we are doing as a country within NASA and so forth, and Mars exploration and all that stuff. And they keep a very, when it comes to the Mars rover Curiosity, that they keep a very fun voice, and they keep they're sharing information about what's going on Mars, and they do it in a fun way, so as to, space exploration and that sort of thing can be dull for some people, but they have created this brand voice that is fun and witty and it's very engaging. And so that's the first tip, is definitely to carry over what your brand voice is. What does your business stand for, and how you would talk to a normal customer of yours. That's how you want to carry that into your social media. But again, it's going to be different from Twitter. Is going to be different from Facebook. It's going to be different from Vine or LinkedIn or that sort of thing. So you definitely want to customize it to whatever platform that you're on.
So we have established that getting more engaged in social media. Now, how do you grow your audience? How do you find more people and get more Twitter followers? Is it following the hashtag, engaging with other random people, submitting yourself to directories? What's some ways to grow your tribe?
Sure. So all the above, actually, what you just said, Alex. I mean, so we'll look at Twitter as an example. There's a couple different ways to do that. Number one, you definitely want to be putting out good content. And when it comes to Twitter, it's 140 characters. It's sort of quick hits, sort of the witty kind of short sentences work very well on Twitter. And when you're putting that type of content out there, always be thinking about, as I mentioned before, adding value to the conversation. And you're not always spouting out your sales message about a product that you have coming out or a service that you're offering. Really try to add value first whenever possible. And so on Twitter, it's really easy to search for conversations. As you mentioned, you can search using hashtags and so forth. A good way to do it also to build your following is to find out who the leaders are in your space, follow them, but also look at who is following those people. And it's not so much anymore, but it's still sort of an accepted practice that if you follow somebody, often they're going to follow you back. And so you can find out who those leaders are in your space, find out who's following them, and you can go follow those people, and they'll often follow you back. And that's when you can start listening to the conversations that are going on. Twitter has a really good search functionality, both there, just the general search field at the top of Twitter's page, as well as their advanced search is pretty robust. Does a good job of finding different conversations and so forth. So again, just joining those conversations and adding value whenever possible, and that's how you start to build your following on Twitter. So look for the relevant people who in your industry, relevant topics. Start following those conversations. Start following those people. A lot of times they'll follow you back, and just keep adding. The other thing too there is be consistent with it. If you jump into Twitter and you've not been there before, and you start posting, and you start building a following there, and then all of a sudden you just go dark. You just sort of abandon it for 6 months. Well, when someone goes to look for you, I do this a lot when I'm doing research for different projects that I'm working on. I use Twitter a lot, and I can tell a lot about what a brand is doing or what a person's doing within their social media efforts by, frankly, when the last time they updated their status or a tweet. And so be really consistent about it, because there's nothing worse than one of your customers doing some research and trying to find out more about you, and they're using Twitter or they're using Facebook or some other social platform to do that, and your social profile on whatever platform that they're looking is a ghost town, and that you were consistent for a little while and then stopped. So just be really consistent on whatever platform you're going to be on.
So be consistent and be relevant.
Yes.
Great tips.
And be real. Be real.
And be real.
Yeah.
One of the things I used to do as I was growing my Twitter following, when I had free time, I would just search for specific topics that were in my niche. In this case, it was e-commerce or conversion e-commerce, and I'd find people who were talking about that and maybe had questions or whatever, and I would just answer random people. I wouldn't follow them at all, and it really just created a conversation with these people, and it established me as an authority just within that short time period.
Absolutely. And you do it in a way that the way that you described it is perfect, Alex. You do it in a way that's not non-creepy, where they're like, hey, why is this person jumping into my conversation here? Mm-hmm. But if you look for those conversations and you're able to add value, you're able to answer a question. Yes, you absolutely establish your authority in that way. It's a really, really effective manner.
Have you seen some brands or small businesses doing some really cool stuff on social media, whether it's with graphics or infographics or GIFs? There's so many new things going on. Anything innovative or anything you want to share with the audience?
Who's doing really cool stuff in social media? I think that like Taco Bell comes to mind. I'll sort of list them out and then come back and talk about the examples. I think Taco Bell is doing really cool things. Red Bull obviously does really cool things. GE does really cool things. NASA does really cool things. All my guests are going to be mad that I have left them off this list. So I'll just start with that. So Taco Bell does a really good job of listening to their audience. They obviously have a very niche age within their audience, and they do a really good job of listening to them and finding out where they need to be, and what I mean by that is what social channels they need to be. And so, for example, the reason that they joined Snapchat earlier this year, I think it was earlier this year, was because people were asking about it. Why, are you on Snapchat, or why aren't you on Snapchat? So they did their research as to how to use Snapchat, and that's what the good brands really do. They listen to their customers, they listen to the conversations that are going on, and then make decisions based on what those people are asking. And Taco Bell, and I'm not remembering exactly what they launched. It was a burrito, I believe it was. Sorry,
let me ask you a question about that. So Snapchat,
yes, if
they have a ton of people that are signing for their Snapchat, how are they even managing that? How does that even work? Does Snapchat have a network admin that you can submit to thousands of people?
Oh no, I mean they're following you on Snapchat.
Right,
it's similar to Twitter in a sense of they start following you.
Right.
And they weren't on Snapchat at the time, and decided that because they were getting this feedback from their customer base that asking for it, that they needed to be on there. And so they used Snapchat really, really creatively when they launched, and I don't remember what it was, but it was a burrito, I believe it was. But they were bringing a burrito back.
Probably something Doritos.
Yeah, there was two of them. I'm totally blanking on which one it was because they did one on Instagram and one on Snapchat. But they relaunched one of their menu items on Snapchat, and it was very simple. But the way that, because it was so creative, or the reason I should say that it was creative and it was so effective, was because it aligned with the platform. It aligned with how users are using Snapchat. And that's sort of, you notice kind of a theme that we're talking about is the more that you can be putting content out there that aligns with the platform and how users are using it, the more effective that you're going to be. I mentioned NASA before. NASA does a really good job, and they do a lot of creative things on Google+. And the reason that they're on Google+ is because Google+ tends to attract an audience that is looking to talk about a topic very deeply. So they like to really dive into specific topics, and NASA is one of those types of topics that people like to really dive in on and learn more about. And so NASA has understood this and found this out. So they focus a lot of efforts on Google+, and they use Google Hangouts really, really well. It's not super, you asked about being creative. It's not super creative, but it's really effective because they hold free Google Hangouts they bring astronauts on, they bring engineers on, they bring people from the control rooms and so forth, or mission control or whatever. And they have, they do live Q&As, and it's totally free. You can, so it's really, really good brand building for NASA, and they're building a community that way and really leveraging Google Plus really smartly. So there's a couple of examples, not super creative from a NASA standpoint, but very, very effective for how they're using the platform.
One last question. What is one thing that small businesses can do with their social media to help it get to the next level?
One thing. They can, the one thing is they can understand the platforms. And I keep going back to this because it's so important. And the reason that so many small businesses are not very effective on social media is because they think they need to be on every single platform that's out there. They need to be on Twitter. They need to be on Facebook. They need to be on LinkedIn. They need to be on all these, which isn't, in my view, isn't necessarily true. And, in talking with all these brands as well, that's how they handle and that's how they approach their social media as well, is they're not necessarily on every single platform out there. And the way that I recommend small businesses choosing how to, or where to be, I should say, on social media is, like I mentioned before, understand who their audience is, understand what their business objective is, and then which of the platforms are out there will help you achieve your business objective and that align with your audience. So it's probably not going to be 7 different platforms. It might only be Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So, rather than being on 9 different platforms, you're on, 2 to 3 different platforms. So that's the biggest thing that I would say that would give the biggest return for small businesses is understand your business objective, your audience, and then understand how the platforms work so that you can figure out which ones to be on that align with your objective and align with your audience.
Yeah, find that one that could be working for you and pour your energy into there, really build your audience, and that's really how you can maybe move over to another channel later.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Rick. Let's tell people how they can find out more about you.
The podcast is on iTunes and Stitcher and so forth. It's called Inside Social Media. And I'm also, my online headquarters, if you will, is rickmulready.com. It's RickMulready.com.